The Republic of Venice, Italian, Repubblica di Venezia, was a state originating from the city of Venice in northeastern Italy. It existed for over a millennium, from the late 7th century until 1797. Despite its long history of war and conquest, the Republic's modern reputation is chiefly based on its status as an economic and trading power. It was formerly known as the Most Serene Republic of Venice, Italian, Serenissima Repubblica di Venezia, Venetian, Serenissima Repubblica Vèneta citation needed or Repubblica de Venesia citation needed, and is often referred to as La Serenissima, in reference to its title as one of the most serene republics. History. The city of Venice originated as a collection of lagoon communities banded together for mutual defense from the Lombards, Huns, and other invading peoples as the power of the Western Roman Empire dwindled in northern Italy. At some point in the first decades of the 8th century, the people of the Byzantine province of Venice elected their first leader Ursus, or Orso Ipato, who was confirmed by Constantinople and given the titles of hypatus and dux. He was the first historical Doge of Venice. Tradition, however, first attested in the early 11th century, states that the Venetians first proclaimed one Anafestus Paulicius Duke in 697, though this story dates to no earlier than the chronicle of John the Deacon. Whichever the case, the first doges had their power base in Heraclea. Rise. Ursus's successor, Deacon, moved his seat from Heraclea to Malamaco in the 740s. He was the son of Ursus and represented the attempt of his father to establish a dynasty. Such attempts were more than commonplace among the doges of the first few centuries of Venetian history, but all were ultimately unsuccessful. During the reign of Deacon, Venice became the only remaining Byzantine possession in the north, and the changing politics of the Frankish Empire began to change the factional divisions within Venetia. One faction was decidedly pro-Byzantine. They desired to remain well connected to the empire. Another faction, republican in nature, believed in continuing along a course towards practical independence. The other main faction was pro-Frankish. Supported mostly by clergy, in line with papal sympathies of the time, they looked towards the new Carolingian king of the Franks, Pepin the Short, as the best provider of defense against the Lombards. A minor, pro-Lombard, faction was opposed to close ties with any of these further off powers and interested in maintaining peace with the neighboring, and surrounding, but for the sea, Lombard kingdom. Early Middle Ages. The successors of Oblario inherited a united Venice. By the Pax Nicefori, 803, the two emperors had recognized that Venice belonged to the Byzantine sphere of influence. Many centuries later, the Venetians claimed that the treaty had recognized Venetian de facto independence, but the truth of this claim is doubted by modern scholars. A Byzantine fleet sailed to Venice in 807 and deposed the Doge, replacing him with a Byzantine governor. Nevertheless, during the reign of the Participatio family, Venice grew into its modern form. Though Heraclean by birth, Agnello, the first Participatio Doge, was an early immigrant to Rialto, and his dogeship was marked by the expansion of Venice towards the sea via the construction of bridges, canals, bulwarks, fortifications, and stone buildings. The modern Venice, at one with the sea, was being born. Agnello was succeeded by his son Giustiniano, who stole the remains of Saint Mark the Evangelist from Alexandria, took them to Venice, and made him the Republic's patron saint. During the reign of the successor of the Participatio, Pietro Tridonico, Venice began to establish its military might, which would influence many a later crusade and dominate the Adriatic for centuries. Tridonico secured the sea by fighting Slavic and Saracen pirates. Tridonico's reign was long and successful, 837–64, but he was succeeded by the Participatio, and it appeared that a dynasty may have finally been established. Around 841, the Republic of Venice sent a fleet of 60 galleys, each carrying 200 men, to assist the Byzantines in driving the Arabs from Crotone, but it failed. In 1000, Pietro II Orziala sent a fleet of 6 ships to defeat the Narentine and Croatian pirates from Dalmatia. High Middle Ages. In the High Middle Ages, Venice became extremely wealthy through its control of trade between Europe and the Levant, and it began to expand into the Adriatic Sea and beyond. In 1084, Domenico Selvo personally led a fleet against the Normans, but he was defeated and lost 9 great galleys, the largest and most heavily armed ships in the Venetian war fleet. Venice was involved in the Crusades almost from the very beginning. 200 Venetian ships assisted in capturing the coastal cities of Syria after the First Crusade. In 1110, Ordolafo Faliero personally commanded a Venetian fleet of 100 ships to assist Baldwin I of Jerusalem and Sigurd I of Norway in capturing the city of Sidon. In 1123 they were granted virtual autonomy in the Kingdom of Jerusalem through the Pactum Warmundi. The Venetians also gained extensive trading privileges in the Byzantine Empire during the 12th century, and their ships often provided the empire with a navy. In 1182, a vicious anti-Western riot broke out in Constantinople targeting Latins, and Venetians in particular. Many in the empire had become jealous of Venetian power and influence, and thus when the pretender Andronikos I Komnenos marched on the city, Venetian property was seized and the owners imprisoned or banished, an act which humiliated and angered the Republic. In 1183, the city of Zara, Croatian, Zadar, successfully rebelled against Venetian rule. The city then put itself under the dual protection of the papacy and King Emmerich of Hungary. The Dalmatians separated from Hungary by a treaty in 1199, and they paid Hungary with a portion of Macedonia. In 1201, the city of Zadar recognized Emmerich as overlord. The leaders of the Fourth Crusade, 1202-04, contracted with Venice to provide a fleet for transportation to the Levant. When the Crusaders were unable to pay for the ships, Doge Enrico Dandolo offered transport if the Crusaders were to capture Zara, which had proven too well fortified, citation needed for Venice to retake alone. Upon the capture of Zara, the crusade was again diverted, this time to Constantinople to avenge the 1182 massacre. The capture and sacking of Constantinople has been described as one of the most profitable and disgraceful sacks of a city in history. The Venetians claimed much of the plunder, including the famous 4 bronze horses that were brought back to adorn St. Mark's Basilica. Furthermore, in the subsequent partition of the Byzantine lands, Venice gained a great deal of territory in the Aegean Sea, amounting to 3/8 of the Byzantine Empire. This included the islands of Crete, Candia, and Euboea, Negroponte. The present core city of Chania on Crete is largely of Venetian construction, built atop the ruins of the ancient city of Cydonia. The Aegean Islands came to form the Venetian Duchy of the archipelago. The Byzantine Empire would be re-established in 1261 by Michael VIII Palaiologos but never again recovered its previous power and was eventually conquered by the Ottoman Turks. The Republic of Venice signed a trade treaty with the Mongol Empire in 1221. In 1295, Pietro Gradenigo sent a fleet of 68 ships to attack a Genoese fleet at Alexandretta, then another fleet of 100 ships were sent to attack the Genoese in 1299. From 1350 to 1381, Venice fought an intermittent war with the Genoese. Initially defeated, they devastated the Genoese fleet at the Battle of Chioggia in 1380 and retained their prominent position in eastern Mediterranean affairs at the expense of Genoa's declining empire. 15th century. In the early 15th century, the Venetians also began to expand in Italy, as well as along the Dalmatian coast from Istria to Albania, which was acquired from King Ladislaus of Naples during the civil war in Hungary. Ladislaus was about to lose the conflict and had decided to escape to Naples, but before doing so he agreed to sell his now practically forfeit rights on the Dalmatian cities for a meager sum of 100,000 ducats. Venice exploited the situation and quickly installed nobility to govern the area, for example, Count Filippo Stipanov in Zadar. This move by the Venetians was a response to the threatening expansion of Giangolizzo Visconti, Duke of Milan. Control over the northeast mainland routes was also a necessity for the safety of the trades. By 1410, Venice had a navy of 3,300 ships, manned by 36,000 men, and taken over most of Venetia, including such important cities as Verona, which swore its loyalty in the devotion of Verona to Venice in 1405, and Padua. The situation in Dalmatia had been settled in 1408 by a truce with King Sigismund of Hungary, but the difficulties of Hungary finally granted to the Republic the consolidation of its Adriatic dominions. At the expiration of the truce, Venice immediately invaded the Patriarchate of Aquileia, and subjected Troia, Spalato, Durazzo and other Dalmatian cities. Slaves were plentiful in the Italian city-states as late as the 15th century. Between 1414 and 1423, some 10,000 slaves were sold in Venice, almost all of whom were nubile young women from the Balkans. In February 1489, the island of Cyprus, previously a Crusader state, the Kingdom of Cyprus, was annexed to Venice. The Ottoman Empire started sea campaigns as early as 1423, when it waged a 7-year war with the Venetian Republic over maritime control of the Aegean, the Ionian, and the Adriatic seas. The wars with Venice resumed in 1463 until a favorable peace treaty was signed in 1479, just after the troublesome siege of Shkodra. In 1480, now no longer hampered by the Venetian fleet, the Ottomans besieged Rhodes and briefly captured Otranto. By 1490, the population of Venice had risen to about 180,000 people. War with the Ottomans resumed from 1499 to 1503. In 1499, Venice allied itself with Louis XII of France against Milan, gaining Cremona. In the same year, the Ottoman Sultan moved to attack Lepanto by land, and sent a large fleet to support his offensive by sea. Antonio Grimani, more a businessman and diplomat than a sailor, was defeated in the sea battle of Zonchio in 1499. The Turks once again sacked Friuli. Preferring peace to total war both against the Turks and by sea, Venice surrendered the bases of Lepanto, Durazzo, Modon, and Coron. Venice's attention was diverted from its usual maritime position by the delicate situation in Romagna, then one of the richest lands in Italy, which was nominally part of the Papal States but effectively divided into a series of small lordships which were difficult for Rome's troops to control. Eager to take some of Venice's lands, all neighboring powers joined in the League of Cambrai in 1508, under the leadership of Pope Julius II. The Pope wanted Romagna, Emperor Maximilian I, Friuli and Veneto, Spain, the Apulian ports, the King of France, Cremona, the King of Hungary, Dalmatia, and each of the others some part. The offensive against the huge army enlisted by Venice was launched from France. On May 14, 1509, Venice was crushingly defeated at the Battle of Agnadello, in the Guerra di Adda, marking one of the most delicate points in Venetian history. French and imperial troops were occupying Veneto, but Venice managed to extricate itself through diplomatic efforts. The Apulian ports were ceded in order to come to terms with Spain, and Pope Julius II soon recognized the danger brought by the eventual destruction of Venice, then the only Italian power able to face kingdoms like France or empires like the Ottomans. The citizens of the mainland rose to the cry of Marco, Marco, and Andrea Gritti recaptured Padua in July 1509, successfully defending it against the besieging imperial troops. Spain and the Pope broke off their alliance with France, and Venice regained Brescia and Verona from France also. After 7 years of ruinous war, the Serenissima regained its mainland dominions west to the Adda River. Although the defeat had turned into a victory, the events of 1509 marked the end of the Venetian expansion. In 1489, the first year of Venetian control of Cyprus, Turks attacked the Carpathia Peninsula, pillaging and taking captives to be sold into slavery. In 1539 the Turkish fleet attacked and destroyed Limassol. Fearing the ever-expanding Ottoman Empire, the Venetians had fortified Famagusta, Nicosia, and Kyrenia, but most other cities were easy prey. By 1563, the population of Venice had dropped to about 168,000 people. In the summer of 1570, the Turks struck again, but this time with a full-scale invasion rather than a raid. About 60,000 troops, including cavalry and artillery, under the command of Mustafa Pasha landed unopposed near Limassol on July 2, 1570, and laid siege to Nicosia. In an orgy of victory on the day that the city fell September 9, 1570, 20,000 Nicosians were put to death, and every church, public building, and palace was looted. Word of the massacre spread, and a few days later Mustafa took Kyrenia without having to fire a shot. Famagusta, however, resisted and put up a heroic defense that lasted from September 1570 until August 1571. The fall of Famagusta marked the beginning of the Ottoman period in Cyprus. 2 months later, the naval forces of the Holy League, composed mainly of Venetian, Spanish, and Papal ships under the command of Don John of Austria, defeated the Turkish fleet at Battle of Lepanto. The victory over the Turks, however, came too late to help Cyprus, and the island remained under Ottoman rule for the next 3 centuries. By 1575, the population of Venice was about 175,000 people, but partly as a result of the plague of 1575-76 dropped to 124,000 people by 1581. 17th century. In 1606, a conflict between Venice and the Holy See began with the arrest of 2 clerics accused of petty crimes, and with a law restricting the Church's right to enjoy and acquire landed property. Pope Paul V held that these provisions were contrary to canon law, and demanded that they be repealed. When this was refused, he placed Venice under an interdict. The Republic paid no attention to the interdict or the act of excommunication, and ordered its priests to carry out their ministry. It was supported in its decisions by the Servite monk Paolo Sarpi, a sharp polemical writer who was nominated to be the Signoria's advisor on theology and canon law in 1606. The interdict was lifted after a year, when France intervened and proposed a formula of compromise. Venice was satisfied with reaffirming the principle that no citizen was superior to the normal processes of law. The latter half of the 17th century saw also prolonged wars with the Ottoman Empire. In the Cretan War, 1645-1669, after a heroic siege that lasted 24 years, Venice lost its major overseas possession, the island of Crete, while it made some advances in Dalmatia. In 1684, however, taking advantage of the Ottoman involvement against Austria in the Great Turkish War, the Republic initiated the Maurine War, which lasted until 1699 and in which it was able to conquer the Morea Peninsula in southern Greece. Decline. These gains did not last, however. In December 1714, the Turks began the last Turkish-Venetian War, when the Morea was without any of those supplies which are so desirable even in countries where aid is near at hand, which are not liable to attack from the sea. The Turks took the islands of Tinos and Aegina, crossed the isthmus, and took Corinth. Daniel Dolphin, commander of the Venetian fleet, thought it better to save the fleet than risk it for the Morea. When he eventually arrived on the scene, Nauplia, Modon, Corone, and Malvasia had fallen. Lefkaz in the Ionian Islands, and the bases of Spinalonga and Ceuta on Crete, which still remained in Venetian hands, were abandoned. The Turks finally landed on Corfu, but its defenders managed to throw them back. In the meantime, the Turks had suffered a grave defeat by the Austrians in the Battle of Petrovaradin on August 5, 1716. Venetian naval efforts in the Aegean and the Dardanelles in 1717 and 1718, however, met with little success. With the Treaty of Passarowitz, July 21, 1718, Austria made large territorial gains, but Venice lost the Morea, for which its small gains in Albania and Dalmatia were little compensation. This was the last war with the Ottoman Empire. By the year 1792, the once great Venetian merchant fleet had declined to a mere 309 merchantmen. The decline of Venice as a seaborne empire should not obscure the fact that the Republic remained in undisturbed possession of its vast and rich continental domain north of the Po Valley, extending west almost to the walls of Milan. Treviso, Vicenza, Padova, Verona, Brescia, Bergamo, not to mention Venice itself, benefited handsomely from the Pax Venetia, Venetian peace, throughout the allegedly decadent 18th century. By 1796, the Republic of Venice could no longer defend itself since its war fleet numbered only 4 galleys and 7 galleots. In spring 1796, Piedmont fell and the Austrians were beaten from Monte to Lodi. The army under Bonaparte crossed the frontiers of neutral Venice in pursuit of the enemy. By the end of the year the French troops were occupying the Venetian state up to the Adige. Vicenza, Cadore, and Friuli were held by the Austrians. With the campaigns of the next year, Napoleon aimed for the Austrian possessions across the Alps. In the preliminaries to the Peace of Leoben, the terms of which remained secret, the Austrians were to take the Venetian possessions in the Balkans as the price of peace, April 18, 1797, while France required the Lombard part of the state. After Napoleon's ultimatum, Doge Ludovico Manin surrendered unconditionally on May 12, and abdicated himself, while the Major Council declared the end of the Republic. According to Bonaparte's orders, the public powers passed to a provisional municipality under the French military governor. On October 17, France and Austria signed the Treaty of Campo Formio, according the sharing of all the territory of the ancient Republic, with a new border just west of the Adige River. Italian Democrats, especially young poet Ugo Foscolo, viewed the treaty as a betrayal. The metropolitan part of the disbanded Republic became an Austrian territory, under the name of Venetian Province, Provincia Veneta in Italian, Venedig Province in German. Legacy. Even though the economic vitality of the Venetian Republic had started to decline since the 16th century due to the movement of international trade towards the Atlantic, its political regime still appeared in the 18th century as a model for the philosophers of the Enlightenment. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was hired in July 1743 as secretary by Comte de Montaigu, who had been named ambassador of the French in Venice. This short experience nevertheless awakened the interest of Rousseau to the policy, which led him to design a large book of political philosophy project. After the Discourse on the Origin and Basis of Inequality Among Men, 1755, he published The Social Contract, 1762. The Winged Lion of St. Mark, which had appeared on the Republic's flag and coat of arms, is still featured in the red-yellow flag of the city of Venice, which has 6 tails, one for each sestiere of the city, in the coat of arms of the city, and in the yellow-red-blue flag of Veneto, which has 7 tails representing the 7 provinces of the region. The winged lion also appears in the naval ensign of the Italian Republic, alongside the coat of arms of 3 other medieval Italian maritime republics, Genoa, Pisa, and Amalfi, as well as the Golden Lion, awarded at the Venice Film Festival, and in the insignia of the Assicurazioni Generali Insurance Company. Government. In the early years of the Republic, the Doge ruled Venice in an autocratic fashion, but later his powers were limited by the Promission, a pledge he had to take when elected. As a result, powers were shared with the Maggior Concilio or Great Council, composed of 480 members taken from patrician families, so that he could do nothing without the Major Council and the Major Council could do nothing without him. In the 12th century, the aristocratic families of Rialto further diminished the Doge's powers by establishing the Minor Council, 1175, composed of 6 advisors of the Doge, and the Quarantia, 1179, as a supreme tribunal. In 1223, these institutions were combined into the Signoria, which consisted of the Doge, the Minor Council and the 3 leaders of the Quarantia. The Signoria was the central body of government, representing the continuity of the Republic as shown in the expression, "Sie morto il Doge, no la Signoria," the Doge is dead, but the Signoria is not. Also created were the sapients, 2, later 6, bodies that combined with other groups to form a collegio, which formed an executive branch. In 1229, the Concilio dei Brigati, a senate, was formed, being 60 members elected by the major council. These developments left the Doge with little personal power and saw actual authority in the hands of the major council. Whilst Venice claimed to be a republic, in reality it followed a mixed government model, combining monarchy in the Doge, aristocracy in the Senate, and a democracy of Rialto families in the major council. Machiavelli also refers to Venice as a republic, considering it excellent among modern republics, unlike his native Florence. In 1310, a Council of 10 was established, becoming the central political body whose members operated in secret. Around 1600, its dominance over the major council was considered a threat and efforts were made in the council and elsewhere to reduce its powers, with limited success. In 1454, the Supreme Tribunal of the three state inquisitors was established to guard the security of the Republic. By means of espionage, counter-espionage, internal surveillance, and a network of informers, they ensured that Venice did not come under the rule of a single signore, as many other Italian cities did at the time. One of the inquisitors, popularly known as Il Rosso, the Red One, because of his scarlet robe, was chosen from the Doge's councillors, two popularly known as I Negri, the Black Ones, because of their black robes, were chosen from the Council of 10. The Supreme Tribunal gradually assumed some of the powers of the Council of 1019. In 1556, the Provveditori ai Beni Inculti were also created for the improvement of agriculture by increasing the area under cultivation and encouraging private investment in agricultural improvement. The consistent rise in the price of grain during the 16th century encouraged the transfer of capital from trade to the land.